Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Play Typer Guy podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Robinson, and joining me today is my friend John Storr, publisher of the editorial board newsletter website. You should go subscribe. Page subscriber, even better. It's great work that he does. And she's definitely I hate to use that term, trying times, but yes, in these times, please contribute and support independent journalism. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Stephen. It's finally nice to finally meet you. We've been corresponding for months, I guess, a long
Yeah,
time, but we've never spoken, so this is very nice.
thank you. And so since the election, I've had some folks on. We talked about sort of their thoughts of what had happened as to far as to how Trump got reelected. But I want to speak with you because I'd seen a thread both on social media and also uh, on the editorial board about sort of what isn't happening, which is sort of the Democratic response to uh, essentially democracy ending, because according to the fundraising emails I got daily, that's what this was. And now it just seems as if they are responding and acting as if Nikki Haley or even Ron DeSantis had won and not Trump, despite what we've been seeing. So what are your thoughts on that, John?
Well, I didn't really start thinking about this until Trump started nominating people for his cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And, first thing I noticed is that every one of them is terrible. Terrible. Like, has no bit, well, maybe not every single one. Most have no business leading anything bigger than a front office. uh, and just like, and they're just nominating them. It occurred to me was like an affront to anybody's sense of merit and excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you teach your kid, you know, if you want something, you got to work at it and try hard and take a risk and achieve and then establish mastery over whatever subject you choose to do and gain the respect and admiration of your peers and so on and so forth. Most of these people have none of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to thinking, that was when I started thinking about this, but I started really thinking about it when I heard the Democratic reaction to some of these people, in particular John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, the senator there, saying that Dr. Oz would be just fine in overseeing Medicare and Medicaid as long as he promised to protect Medicare and Medicaid. And I thought, that is the lowest threshold you can possibly put on somebody who is not qualified. He's a
Mm-hmm.
TV personality. So why are we playing nice when we could just? They're giving us the football, Stephen. They're saying,
Mm-hmm.
go run 99 yards and score a touchdown. And we're saying, no, thanks. I'm not going to do that because my reputation for being reasonable is more important than actually scoring points. And
Yeah.
so that's really where I began thinking about these things.
And you'd gone and you touch on a lot of things there that we're sort of seeing. So one being, I would call it like banging your head against the wall from Democrats of like, despite all evidence, and I get this, I've written about this. I get the idea that Democrats believe in good governance. They believe the idea that we don't, it's a president now and we can't have them fail. We can't, let's try to make things less bad, despite since, Barack Obama wins with an overwhelming mandate. He's overwhelmingly popular. Any got, if a Republican had won with that degree of popularity with 57 Senate seats, with that, the Democratic response would be, oh, let's help him. Let's try to get our name on some of this legislation. Mitch
Right.
McConnell and others knew early on, no, we need to deny him everything. We need to be resolute and blocking him. And again, to put in perspective, this was a tremendously popular president in
Yes.
2009, tremendously popular. And they're like, no, we need to hammer that on. And I get Democrats not respecting that, but in the sense that you have to win elections to govern, 2010 2014, 2016, 2021, 2020, and now 2022, 2024, consistently the voters are falling or perceive the idea of the politics of no and failure. And as bad as you might not, as much as we might not like that, if you are someone who wants to do constructive policy, when you're up against a fascist movement, that's even, it's sort of like now the guardrails are off, right? It's like, okay, well, yeah, I should be adopting a Mitch McConnell versus Barack Obama policy against someone I said was a literal fascist. That seems perfectly reasonable now, right? Like I'm going to block, like it's a given, no votes. Like like Fetterman's like if Oz is going to get nominated, get confirmed regardless of him, right? It's up to whether Murkowski, Collins, whatever the so-called moderates do, and they're not, they're still going to back him. So it's the easiest thing for him to say, yeah, like don't even talk to me. I'm not voting for anyone this person puts forward. But
And that would
they're
be
not.
good politics. That would be good politics for him. What I don't understand the incentive. The only incentive I can think of from the Democratic point of view is the maintaining of a reputation of being reasonable, right? Which really puts you above politics. And the fact is that you're not above politics. The Democratic Party has a problem in that it thinks it's a political party that's above politics. That's the problem. And that's not obviously not all of them. Many of them, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez understands exactly what she needs to do. Many others know exactly. They are politicians and they need to stop being reasonable. The whole idea of being reasonable, by the way, is a vestige from 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I mean, you could see it. It's like baked into Dick Durbin's metabolism to be reasonable. Dick Durbin being the senator from Illinois, who is the chair of the Judiciary Committee right now, and is just dragging his feet, literally dragging his feet, in nominating the last judicial nominees, or getting through the Senate the last judicial nominees. He's in fact literally running out of time because he's not taking this seriously. He's just not. And so that's one of the reasons why I keep thinking like, well, my question has been this week, I would like to know which of the Democrats really meant it when they said that Donald Trump is a menace to democracy, and which of them just said it because it sounded nice.
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
That means a change in strategy, a change in what you do. And I just don't fundamentally see that. In often cases, it's like, I was commenting on this earlier today. You think about what needs to be done, and then you feel as if you're asking, a mouse to behave like a fox. Like it's ridiculous. Like, why am I even going through this? And that's kind of what's happening with this party. And I hate to use the term like run like a business, right? But it goes back in 2016 and other examples of there'll be a tremendous loss, an outcome that is not what they expected. And then the leadership, it's like they go in on a Monday and okay, Schumer and Pelosi leaves only because she wants to. And I have nothing against Pelosi, but it's like, okay, there was no sense of, in 2016, should we have the same leadership? Whenever you're caught, like we should make changes, right? Maybe Nick make a change in the Senate. Maybe Dick Durbin's not the wartime concierge. None of this happens. So it just doesn't, it's like you and me are like, we have this job for life. We're the Duke of Suffolk or something, and we're going to have this forever. And so nobody, bad show. France just invaded, but we're still, nothing changes. Nothing changes. It's like, I guess we can't fundamentally, but even then I think that there'd be a palace coup or something. There's no palace coup. There's sort of that sense of, I guess this is the team we have forever.
That's a great point. It might, and that could lead to the impression that there's no accountability even within the Democratic Party. I mean, what's at stake if seniority, if I'm just I got my job, right? And I really literally can't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Even when I do actually do certain things that are wrong.
I'm not majority leader anymore. I'm minority leader. Oh, bad show. I'm Hakeem Jeffries. I'm not going to be speaker. I thought I might have been. I'm just going to be Democratic leader. Oh, well, but not a true. And we've seen quite the opposite in the Republican Party. And Democrats used to mock this, right? So you would we talk about sometimes their smugness. They mocked Republicans for taking out Kevin McCarthy. They showed up at the speaker votes with popcorn, right? Eating the pop. Oh, look how, lack of they're all wolves and they're all hungry and they don't have but then they lost, they still lost again. They thought that they were going to take back the House and they didn't. And whenever I see people talk about, well, they don't have a mandate, it's like, well, that's only relevant to your point. It's only relevant if you're using that to block everything, right? So if Fetterman is saying, well, Trump narrowly won by 49, was because of inflation and immigration. We screwed up there, fine, but he doesn't have a mandate. Screw him. I'm not supporting anybody he shows up with. But when they come in hat in hand saying, oh, well, let's work, it reads as weakness, right? It reads as if we're saying you are popular. We do need to work with you.
I think that you're going back to the working class, the hemorrhaging of the working class. The Democrats are really stuck on policy, and I'm telling you, I come, if I know anything, that's two things. One is white evangelical Protestantism. I know a lot about that, and I can an expert, right? And two is white working class people. White working class people know nothing about policy. You can talk to them about policy all day, really, all day, and it just won't matter that much. Now, I'm not saying they're stupid. They're not. It's just that they don't hear it, right? What they hear is power. And if you are talking as if from a position of strength, you could be talking about Dunkin' Donuts. It just doesn't, what the thing you're talking about won't matter. What they hear is how you're talking about it. And that's why Bernie Sanders was so attractive to a lot of these folks. That's why Donald Trump is so attractive to a lot of these folks. It's the way he talks. Now, going back to Democrats, when they talk about policy, they put a premium on sounding reasonable, right? Sticking with the facts, measuring outcomes, things like that. You're going to lose voters. They're just not going to hear it. What you need to say. So let me give you an example as in terms of what they need to say. Right now, the Republicans are talking about how Social Security and Medicare are on the table. And when it comes to the next budget in the next Congress, they were going to have to make hard choices in what to do with Social Security and so on. I know what the Democrats are going to do. They're going to put up a full-throated defense of Social Security and Medicare. They're going to say that this is important and we have to take care of people and so on and so forth. Fine, they should do that. But what they really should be doing is saying, these Republicans are a bunch of scammers. They're scamming you out of your money. They told you one thing, now they're doing another. You should never trust them. We told you so. That's what they should be doing. That gets people's attention. Not reasonable, educated people. It doesn't get their attention. Reasonable, educated people care about policy. They can hear reasoned debate. They can follow the train of logic and so on. White working class people, however smart they might be, they don't react to those signals because they're looking for other signals. They're looking for Trump signals. They're looking for Bernie Sanders and so on. If you say that the Republicans are a bunch of scammers, they're going to be like, huh, okay. Either they're going to say there's a point to that, or they're going to argue with it. Either way, they're reacting to it, and that's where you need them to be.
I agree with you, and I do actually take it further. There are no reasonable people. I think we just flatter ourselves with that argument. And I think Democrats see this. We see this a lot, like when they would talk about Project 2025, which always sounded cool to me. It was like a sci-fi series. Project 2025. They would do things like, oh, Trump's going to dismantle the administrative state. It's like, okay, well, the other side is saying that you're going to send your kid to school and they're going to change their gender, which is a very practical thing for a person to know. Ministers say, oh, they're going to get rid of career servants in these jobs and whatever, like stuff that doesn't mean anything. And I think Democrats, since Trump, have absorbed a lot of never Trumpers, anti-Trump people. God love them, but they're people who couldn't stop Trump.
Yeah,
They're the same. They're the same people who got rejected by the Republican base. So what do they know?
Well, going back to the reasonableness, Democrats actually believe politics is a bad thing. But they don't want to sound like politicians, and this is why they continually go back to this word distraction. The bigotry and the race baiting and so on is just a distraction away from the real issues. And if we can just set that aside and focus on the real issues, and then they can might reach this mythical undecided voter, etc. But the undecided voter doesn't react to those kind of signals. They react to power gestures. So because undecided voters really are not paying attention, right? And they don't really care that much. They just don't. So what I think, I haven't written about this yet, it's kind of percolating in my mind right now, but Democrats really need to set aside the whole idea of distraction, that they need to center right-wing politics and say, this is the problem. This is the problem. These are terrible people. They're trying to scam you. They are hateful, and we don't like them any more than you do. Just to say it like that. But there's a fear. I think it's the fear of, like, especially the Joe Manchin types, that they already know they're at a disadvantage. So to center the bigotry, which is already leaning on them pretty heavily, they feel like that's a kind of suicide. But and maybe that is the case with Manchin. I don't know, but I don't think it is. I think you should definitely center. You should hate the hate is another way of putting it, right? Hate the hate, and you're going to take the risk of being just like those people. But I don't really buy that either. You should just use the power you have when you have it, and you should scream like bloody murder when you don't have power. I mean, you should just do that. I think that's good politics.
Again, since 2016, this sort of hemorrhaging of working class support. At first, it was stated that, like, okay, we're losing white working class voters because they're racist and sexist, but we won't say that because then we're sort of, as you say, centering bigotry, but that's the reason, so we're not going to address it. It was kind of just like ignoring a problem.
Right.
But then the past few elections, despite, I mean, Trump all but wore a Klan hood. So if he did better among black voters than the very polite guy, Romney, that should be telling Democrats something. He did better with, he still won white women despite being overtly misogynistic. He did better with Latinos overall. I mean, there were states where Harris's numbers among white voters were the same as Biden's, but she lost. Like, I think Nevada and the Rust Belt, there were all states where it's because her numbers with minority voters dropped. My fear all along had been 2016 was sort of the canary in the coal mine. There is just a historical relationship with the Democratic Party amongst particularly black voters. It's the community you grow up in. And if you know white evangelicals, the version of that of, like, it's tough to break out of the culture that in which you've been brought up in. If, like, your aunts and your uncle, the people you respect, are like, this is who we vote
Right.
for and this is who we support, and our culture is very much connected with that, that's going to be difficult to get out of. And that was sort of what was happening with black voters, Democratic Party, which I think was a good thing. But if you look at the numbers, Trump's not just doing better with black men, but younger black voters similar to how Sanders was doing well with younger Black voters during the primaries. And it's like that sets of, yeah, I think once those generations, once we get further away from the 60s, we're going to start losing that sort of historical relationship. And if that happens, then it's like, okay, great. Well, you got your white numbers up to 40. You're only losing white voters by 10 points. But now you're losing all working class people of all races. So you're just losing by 10 points across the board. It's not good. So what are your thoughts on that? It just seems like that.
You know what I think of, Stephen, is that your comment about moving farther away from the 60s and losing more ground, losing more of your people, right? That's probably a consequence of what I call the right-wing media apparatus. Mm-hmm. That so much of the Democratic discourse is organized around concepts of left and right, liberal, conservative, right and wrong, even racist, anti-racist. But really, I think this election showed me, anyway, the real access like that is true false. It's really true false. And people who believed lies tended to vote for Trump. People who understood facts to the best of their ability tended to vote for Harris. People in the middle of true false leaned toward Trump, and an older generation, people who remember MLK, who remember the 60s and so on, they had a media diet that's the legacy media, right? And I'm 50, I'm Generation X. I'm pretty much a legacy media guy. Anybody who's 15 years younger than me is pretty baffling when it comes to their media diet. I mean, like, I don't understand it. That's what I mean by baffling. I don't know where they're getting their information. I can only guess, and I guess by going to YouTube to watch jazz videos, and I see these ads for gold bullion, and things that, like, in your term, Stephen, I really ought to say in this segment with you, has been so helpful to me. Your term is right-coded, right-coded, mm-hmm. Right-coded media, right-coded politics, right-coded fill in the blank. It's just so helpful in understanding how people understand politics, where they get what information they're getting, how they receive it and make decisions about who to vote for and so on. And that right coding comes from a massive what I call the right-wing media apparatus. And I call it that because people my age need to understand that it's not just, CBS broadcast, not cable. It's not even, Breitbart or Politico. I mean, it's an entire matrix of media data feeding with social media, from TikTok, from podcasts. That's a whole universe that you're actually more part of it than I am. I don't listen to podcasts, even though I'm a guest on them sometimes. I know when I watch Roku, I have a Roku television, and all the news and opinion options are either mainstream, ABC, so on, or to the right. There's the Newsmax and right side broadcasting. But all the stuff that just broadcasts Trump's his rallies like nonstop. There's nothing on the left.
Oh yeah,
there's no answer.
No, and one of the challenges was sort of reflective of sort of the age problems within the Democratic Party, which tries to appeal to youth people. They will often say, "Well, we tried that with Air America." I was like 20 years ago,
and they just give up on
that's like, but that's like saying, that's when you have fossilized leadership, right? Because that's like saying, hey, let's make a movie of superheroes in it. It's like, I don't know, we tried that and it didn't work. But that was 30 years ago, and then the technology has improved, and like they're very popular now. Like you're completely disconnected. There is a reason that Ted Cruz does podcasts. I don't know if Buttigieg, despite his being about a decade younger than Cruz is on one regularly. I don't think he does. But Ted Cruz has his own, and he doesn't look like, he makes a point of presenting in the podcast, especially when this video taped, it's not as if he is in a boardroom. He's like he's a bro chatting with another bro, a younger man who's very much in the right wing manosphere, and they're talking about the issues, and they talk about them in that sort of language that is not like I have a PowerPoint slide or I'm on Mad Out. It is very sort of like casual, and in ways that appeal. Like people sort of think that liberals have sort of surrendered the idea that there's no way to do liberalism as if it's you and me having a drink and talking about it without a PowerPoint slide. Like somehow that is, and I think if you don't do that, you lose, because part of it is bringing up the idea of when people listen to Rogan or with others, they are not even just kind of different politics, like culturally, right? The idea of like, I get you culturally, because that's what's important. And then, so the Democratic plan of we'll remember that an election starts. So it's like 2 months before the election starts, we'll parachute in to these spaces and start talking. We'll be on Univision and we'll be in a Black church, but we're not present all year round. So Cruz is doing this podcast twice a week.
See, that's it right there. It has to be constant. It has to be all. And the thing about the right-wing media apparatus, as I understand it, is that it's 24/7 feed. It's on all the time, right? It's not on when Rachel Maddow is on. You know, what I mean is Rachel Maddow is Rachel Maddow, and people get their cup of tea and go watch Rachel Maddow for an hour, and then they're done, right? It's on all the time, and it is everywhere. It is ubiquitous, and it's huge. It's much bigger even than it was in 2020, which then was much bigger than it was in 2016, and it keeps getting bigger. It's not. I mean, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, that was the largest expansion of the right-wing media apparatus that I can think of. And Rogan is part of the right-wing media apparatus. Importantly, Rogan is not a political podcaster, right? He's just a guy doing a variety show, what they used to call a variety show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about whatever. But like you have said, his show is right-coded, meaning that it's politics is subliminal to whatever it is that he's bringing to the show. And liberals have no counter to that. There is like none. We always talk about how MSNBC is enough. TV is not enough. TV, let me just say that again. TV is not enough. One channel is not enough. You have to, I said the other day, if we could have 1,000 Pete Buttigiegs talking about cats and raising their kids or whatever, and on all the time, we would be in a much better position than we are today.
And like all this stuff again that AOC is doing is off the clock, but Lauren Underwood should be doing lives. My God, she's this young, attractive woman, and I'm sorry to use attractive, but that's the world we live in. Yes. She should be on this talking, chilling, like but they don't. I mean, they push a sort of what I call the model minority thing. So the model, you're the good, which doesn't appeal to the folks who you need to win over. And then there's no reaction to it. Instead, it's just been like, oh, well, what can we do? And as someone who's worked in theater, I've seen what happens when people take the, oh, well, what can you do approach? They go under. Like I've been with theater that was like, oh, well, people used to come, but now they just want to go see Marvel movies. Oh, whoa. It's like, okay, well, you're going to be closed soon. And you surrendered, and you need to change. And I think we've both been screaming this because I think it's we have to entrepreneurs, right? We're off doing our own thing. We try to make our own stuff. Like you change, you adapt, you're constantly doing it. Sort of, and it's just frustrating to me, and I'm sure to you, right? To just sort of, what? That's it? Like you lost. I want to see, like, where's a sacrifice? Where's a major change? Nothing. You're giving me the same playbook as before that failed. So the idea is like, it's just politics. Nothing in life is like flipping a coin, right? It's like, okay, I don't need to change. I don't need to get a new thumb. eventually it will be heads or tails, right? No, this is, you need to actually do something.
Yeah. Well, right now, I'm going in a slightly different direction, but right now the Democrats seem to be in this mood to be quiet. If they don't do things like Fetterman, where they're like, "Oh, Dr. Oz, as long as he does this one thing I want, then I'll vote for him," or even Elizabeth Warren, who said, as long as Trump caps some interest rate thing, policy thing that she likes, then I'm willing to work with some nonsense. If they're not doing that, then they're just kind of in this wait and see how the car wreck works out. They're hoping that Trump will implode, and they're hoping that public opinion will turn against them. And this is a pretty typical pattern. We've seen it so many times. The Democrats come in, the Republicans come in, they make a mess, and the Democrats are like, "Look, here's the mess. Now hire us so we can clean up the mess," right? And then the cycle turns again, and the Republicans create a crisis where there is no crisis in order to get the Democrats out, and then they create a crisis which the Democrats have to go and clean up, and so you see where it goes.
Yeah.
So right now, one way to break that crisis, or break that pattern, is for the Democrats to say right now that the Republicans will screw it up. They will screw it up. We're not going to wait for public opinion to change and turn against Donald Trump. We're not going to, in other words, follow public opinion. We are going to lead public opinion. There's an opportunity to do that right now. It's a risk because, hey, who knows what will happen in the future. But I think the Democrats are so timid about following public opinion rather than leading it, and then seeing where it goes from there. But I don't,
Well, that's totally true.
One last thing, I'm not that hopeful about that. I'm just not.
No, I don't want to despair, but I'm with you, because it's like I want to be hopeful, but again, I don't want to be like I've got the Michigan J Frog. I'm waiting for him to start dancing, and he's the same ribbit. Like I think that's where I am, because to your point, because you said so many smart things there, that pattern, part of it, some of it's the dumb luck. I'm someone who, like, I never like dumb luck. Like if I jump off a roof and just there happens to be a couple mattresses there that I didn't put there, that's like I'm not going to be in a hurry to do it again.
Right.
So 2018, a lot of that, one, there was a massive resistance to Trump that people did commit to, that I'm not seeing developing already. So I'm sort of like, it's already kind of much more passive than in late 2016.
Again, this goes really back to the right-wing media apparatus. The Democrats weren't wrong when they said there was a backlash against the fall of Roe. They weren't wrong in that, like, constitutional amendments in states like Missouri, they decided in a referendum to enshrine the right to an abortion in the state constitution. That was part of the backlash, right? But Missouri went to Trump. So what happens there? What happens is that the liberals were right in terms of policy. Like, the population at large doesn't like all these restrictions on abortion, except for specific pockets of the country. But at the same time, the voting public is very responsive and very vulnerable to lies, constant lying.
Information is everything, right? If you don't fix information, well, Trump is going, other than the people on MSNBC, Trump is going to be, hailed as everything's coming up roses. That's what you're going to hear on TikTok.
That's the crisis we have right now, I think, Stephen. When you listen to politicians, to political scientists and historians talking about democracies that turn toward authoritarianism, they usually start with some kind of crisis, right? And usually it's like historic unemployment or huge some. And I thought our crisis was the COVID pandemic. I thought that was the crisis that was going to turn. It was going to be the fork, right? And we were going to either turn toward more authoritarianism or we were going to turn toward more democracy. And in 2020, I thought, well, hey, We won. We're heading toward more democracy. Well, it turns out, that the COVID pandemic was not the crisis. That it was a crisis of information.
I think the combination of Trump was offering any law, but more freedom. So I'm going to get rid of Fauci. I'm going to get rid of all these restrictions. And then later, whatever, I'm going to give you some order, which is I'm going to shut down the border and I'm going to make the cities clean again or whatever. And I think people were susceptible to that because Democrats had not, I've often said they sometimes operate as if they have no enemies.
Let me give you a case in point. I live in New Haven, Connecticut. It is dominated by Democrats. There are no Republican office holders in this city. And there is an epidemic of one kind of crime I want to point out, and that is people running red lights. Epidemic. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, and I've been around the country. I've lived in the Midwest, I've lived in the South, and now I'm back here in New England. And they don't do anything about it. Who do I go to? I can yell at my alderman. He'll, and sometimes I think I'll run as a Republican and raise some hell. But if you're I've actually seen one independent guy run on a pro-police, pro-anti-crime platform, and he's definitely shouting into the wind. And there's just, I don't know what there is to be done. The only solution I could see is some kind of systemic reform where municipal elections line up with congressional elections, right? Where that would actually get something done, because it would bring in more voters and so on. Municipal elections here in New Haven, barely anybody votes. So, and I would imagine that's the case for most municipal elections in any Democratic-run city. And the Democrats want it to be that way. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I think there's been that perception that crime doesn't matter, or if that's not big a deal or whatever, from the wrong perspective. They're thinking that is a liberal or progressive view. I mean, again, I'm 50. I was from the old school liberalism of like, air pollution's bad, right? And you got to clean up, only you can prevent forest fire. So you go in places and clean things up and leave. So the idea that wanting a clean city is fascist is weird, because I was just like, no, you should not. We don't want litter or whatever. And that's sort of this view that like people are poor enough that they should not be held to any sort of standards of civilization, which I think is offensive.
That's a great point. It is offensive, right? And it's amoral. I mean, that's what that is. That's amoral. And I think just to jump in here, Stephen. And
no, absolutely.
That is really key. There's a thing called small r republicanism that Democrats really ought to rediscover, right? And that is that, like, democracy actually is problematic, as we saw in this last election. You can get a lot of people to make a very bad decision, which is to elect a fascist, right? And you need to say to those people, need to have the courage to say to these people, to the majority of voters, not the majority of the country, but the majority of voters, that this was a mistake. You did wrong. Now, why did this happen? Let's talk about that. And you're going to risk sounding elitist. You're going to risk sounding paternal, even, right? But the good father attitude is a good idea. I think the good dad quality that I think somebody like Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania actually has. His whole persona is the good dad persona. And I think it would be very, very appealing to a lot of people if Democrats could get over this idea that they're just shy of being accused of elitism, and it's just like, no, when it comes to like what you said, picking up litter, good idea. Stopping people from running red lights, that's a good idea, right? Finding housing for people who need it, that's a good idea. Getting them off the street so the hot dog vendor gets more customers, that's a good idea too. And just speaking in those terms, there's a whole lot of problems on the liberal side, right?
Yeah.
And one of them is this idea of um, is a misunderstanding, I think, of gender politics, in that, like, the good dad quality is a liability of some kind. It's actually not. It's a great quality, and we could talk about that another time.
It was just sort of scary that none of this stuff mattered, and that's what was, to me, to try to tie this up, it makes it worse in 2016. Like, how do we go back? Because the nation, I think once a nation elects a convicted felon, that's not a one-time deal. Other, like, it just lowers the bar permanently, because and then it's like crime doesn't matter, whatever. God forbid, like, what if you get a competent felon, so he really can do what he's offering? So you do get Lex Luthor, who's like, okay, well, flying cars for everyone, but I'm a criminal. Is kind of it, that is tremendously alarming to me, right? That just didn't matter.
Stephen, we should. I mean, I'm kind of worn out by being alarmed so much, but we really, yeah. I mean, that guy is a criminal. There's going to be huge criminal acts, like, so big we won't even see them for years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and most ordinary people who decided at the last minute in this election, they'll never know about it.
The media and some Democrats saying, "Oh, Biden broke his promise about pardoning his son." It's like, well, I mean, he made that promise at a time where, before Trump was not just reelected, but he put in place
Right.
like
Right.
completely cronies who are going to do whatever he wants. It's clear that he's going to selectively and maliciously prosecute anyone who opposed him. He even ran on this. It's so obvious.
Yeah.
And then you have the mainstream media, and like The Godfather, it just means they would talk about having, journalists on the payroll. That's not on the payroll. These are just journalists saying, oh, well, Biden's pardons, a New York Times headline, Biden's pardon echoes Trump's concerns about, because he said he was being selectively targeted. It's like, what?
Yeah.
He said a judge has a Democrat as a daughter, so was out to get him, as opposed to someone with a book being, I want to execute Hunter Biden, is now Attorney General. And you're like, that's the stuff, as you're saying, not the end of the bat. Like, how do you deal with like that degree of fecklessness from like, at least the crooks are crooks, but these are like, you're trying so hard to be institutionalists that you're helping the bad guys.
Yeah, right. I mean, institutionalists can be alienated from morality. You know, you're so wedded to this abstraction of the institution that you're miles away from the who is doing what to whom. You know, and if we lose sight of who is doing what to whom, then we've really lost sight of our own humanity. You know, and if we've lost sight of that, then anything can mean anything. You know, it could just mean anything. Anybody can make any argument about anything, and facts really don't. There's no deference to the authority of any kind of fact. Anything beyond our individual egos and interests, none of that will matter. And it's really, I think, it's just up to normal men and women like us to just keep pointing out what's happening. Just stating plainly what we see, in the hopes that other good people will see it and use that information to make good decisions.
That's almost an optimistic note. So let's look at there. Thank you so much, John, for coming on and talking with me. Where can people find you out on the internets?
They can find me on Blue Sky at Editorial Board. It's just Editorial Board. Or they can go to editorialboard.com. That's my website. And they can sign up for a free newsletter, or they can even sign up for a subscription for the year or by the month.
Yes, please subscribe, support independent journalism. Thank you, John. And like, share, subscribe. We will see you guys next time. Take care.
Thank you.